How's it going, everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of the Startup Mac Vlog. I'm Conwell, also known as Mac, your host, along with my co-host.
I am Kate Alegado, and I just go by Kate. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Kate.
Hi, Mac. I missed you.
Missed you too. Have fun going to see the family. Since Kate's family lives overseas. Everybody, we're here in the U.S., right? Your family's in Germany.
Yes, lovely Germany. And if anyone's watching FIFA, the World Cup that's going on, because I'm not getting anything done for the next month, I'm just watching every single game. So yeah, I hope Germany gets on the top. If anyone agrees out there. But so Matt, what are we talking about today?
So glad to have you back and to get back on track with things. Today we're going to talk about cold messaging, in particular, cold emailing and cold tweeting. How a lot of people talk about, especially in the startup world, the warm intro. But sometimes you want to get that meeting or you want to get in front of somebody who you don't know and you don't have a warm intro to. Well, how do you get in touch with them? How do you write them a message that they actually want to reply back to? And that's what we're going to talk about today. In my former startup and even my current startup, I have quite a bit of experience of not having an initial network to work with, and so having to orchestrate that through a lot of cold messaging, a lot of cold emailing, cold tweeting, a lot of LinkedIn. So we're going to dive into that today.
Got it. So, well, just like, I guess for my reference and for everyone's references, is how was warm introduction, was it beneficial for you, or just like through the cold tweeting and cold emailing, was that just a lot more efficient in your position?
Warm intros are always the best way to go, and so the difference is, let's talk about this. What's a warm intro versus a cold message or cold email? So a warm intro is when somebody who knows you introduces you to somebody you want to get to know, or introduces you to somebody you can work with. So that's like if I have a company and I want better rates for a payment processing. Well, if I know somebody who works at email, who knows somebody who works at PayPal, maybe they can write an email to introduce me to somebody at PayPal so I can start a conversation. As opposed to cold emailing or cold tweeting where you don't know anybody and you're reaching out to somebody who has no clue who you are. You're just writing them a message and throwing a shot in the dark and hoping they reply back. Traditionally, that doesn't work very well percentage-wise, so you typically have to do a lot of them. So typically you'll see like cold emails, email marketing. The average open rate is like around 15 to 20%, maybe sometimes lower depending on the industry. But it can be very effective because if you're a new startup, a young startup, even an established startup, and you need to get in contact with somebody, but you don't have any way to kind of bridge the gap to find a warm intro. So like if you're an early stage startup and you want to meet with a representative at Coke, how do you get tied to Coke? Like you probably don't have that initial person to kind of walk you in the door like, hey, I want you to meet my friend who works at Coke. Well, then in those cases, sometimes you just have to cold email or cold tweet somebody. And that doesn't always work, but when it does work, it can be very beneficial. And I'm going to share techniques on how to increase your chances of having that getting open.
I want to hear them. I wonder what your subject line is, just because that's like the first thing. I mean, I'm not going to open it if there's no awesome subject lines.
That is an awesome lead-in. So the first thing I want to talk about is cold emailing. So typically when you send a cold email, the person has no clue who you are or where this email is coming from. But don't think about it being intrusive, because if you have a company or if your company is on LinkedIn or somewhere else where your email address is readily available, you get emails from other service providers all the time. And understand that some of those service providers, even though it feels like spam most of the time, every now and then you'll get an email from somebody like, this could actually help my company. This is something I actually want to look into. So you have to think about the content you're sending. If you're sending somebody an email where your content or what you're asking them is relevant for them, you're more likely to have that open. And you're not just being spam. You're actually offering them a better service or a new service that they didn't have access or know about before. And if you think about it that way, it kind of brings down the stigma a little bit of cold emailing. And now you mentioned the subject line. That is my #1 key to increasing the open rate. So as I mentioned before, standard open rates of cold emails are pretty low, somewhere around 20–15%. I'm gonna share a technique with everybody today to get your open rate of cold emails up into the 70–80 percentile. And once you have the open rate that high, next thing you need to worry about is your reply rate, which is significantly lower than that. But once you can find out a subject line that'll get people to open your emails, you can then figure out what kind of content to put in to get people to reply to you. And so the key to the subject line is something that an executive in the startup world who is very well versed in business development, he taught me this trick. He said the key to your subject line is try to put as much of your content, or try to put all of what you want to talk about in your main content in your subject line. Why? Because all of us are busy. If you run a business, if you're in a business, if you're an executive, if you're somebody important, you're always on the go. And so when you check your email, Kate, where's the first place you check your emails most of the time?
What do you mean where? Like on a device?
Yeah, what kind of device do you typically check your emails from?
Oh, I would say like 80% on my phone.
Exactly. So when you go to check your emails on your phone, you're looking at the subject line.
Oh yeah, I'm just skimming through it just because, gotta go to a meeting or I'm always on the go, so.
Exactly. So while you're skimming through these subject lines, you want to send somebody a subject line that's going to grab their attention and make them want to open up the email. And now maybe this sounds counterintuitive, but putting in a long subject line that puts in everything that you want to know about or you want to convey to them will greatly increase your open rate. And I can prove this. Mm-hmm. And so when I first heard this, it's really counterintuitive to me. It didn't make any sense. So immediately after my meeting with this executive, I went ahead and tried it. And what I did was, at the time, my startup, we were doing gifting. And we wanted to start gifting digital items. And so we figured, we would love to gift Zynga dollars. And we would love for people to be able to send Zynga dollars to their friends for their birthday and stuff like that. But we had no way to get in touch with anybody from Zynga. So what I did was, I went on LinkedIn and I found somebody who was the vice president and general manager of business development at Zynga, which is a really impressive title, somebody who's potentially a decision maker, who I have no reason getting in touch with. And I sent them an email. And the subject line of my email was as follows: Group gifting startup in the new Me Accelerator in San Francisco, interested in letting users buy Zynga game items for their friends for their birthdays and other events. That long subject line was just my initial subject. And lo and behold, the very next day I got a response email back from y'all. And from then on, it was like a light bulb went off. This is the new thing. This is how I'm going to get to meet people who I don't know, but I really want to know.
So, I guess with the long subject line, what's, the average length that people use? I'm actually trying to think right now how long my subject lines tend to be.
So typically people tend to write short emails, so their subject lines tend to be short. Mm-hmm. So, before that email, my average subject line was like 5 to 6 words. Very short, straight to the point. Because I was always worried of taking away your time. I didn't want to write too much. Mm-hmm. But then when you see a subject line like that, I've given you a lot of context to what my email is. And now I made you intrigued, as opposed to, would love to chat, would love to connect with you, wondering if you had a few moments to have for a meeting. There's no context there, and it's really easy to skip over those emails. But when you see a long subject line, it sticks out.
So that initial, I'm trying to break down the subject line. I wonder if anyone else is listening, if they had any questions on this as well. So your subject line had simply said that you were a startup, that you were in a particular accelerator, and what your ultimate mission is. So I guess in that subject line, should you say your startup's name? Or what if you're not an accelerator? Do you I guess like.
That was just my first one, the one I used for an example.
Okay.
But the current ones that I'm using now for my current startup, I do have my startup's name in the subject line.
Okay.
So just to bring this home, and this is an email I sent back in November 2012. So just to bring that back home, here I am on a new startup, and here's a subject line that I sent out to somebody an email today. And today is June 18th, 2014, almost 2 years later. And my subject line is, I love your clothes and want to sell them on my new app, Redberry, to make them easier to buy from a mobile phone. I put the entire premise of what my message was all in the subject line.
I guess like what's the length of your full email then?
My full email is fairly short.
Okay.
So typically, when you're doing cold emails, you try to keep your emails under 100 words, 150 words. You figure the average blog, they tell you try to be around or under 300 words. So your cold email, you probably want to be shorter than that. The shorter, the better, and straight to the point. But you want to make sure you give them enough information that they get a sense of what you're asking them for or what you're presenting. And that's definitely something you can play around with, whether it be longer or shorter.
So technically, like the first line of an average email would just end up being your subject line.
About, yeah.
Okay.
But like I said, it's all about trying to put as much content in there as you possibly can. And yeah. So, excuse me, I'll be right back. Apparently somebody's at my door.
So to entertain everyone that's on here, I will be jumping onto Google Plus or Twitter right now to kind of get any of your feedbacks or questions that you might have. If any of you guys are local, McKeever's out in Baltimore, and I actually do this broadcast with him in Northern Virginia. So. Hey, Mac.
Sorry about that, everybody. I'm back.
Keeping people company and telling them where we actually broadcast
Despite
out
of being live.
You know, I don't think everyone on here actually really knows where we're coming out of. Like, I just told them that you're out of Baltimore, and I'm right out of Northern Virginia, so I find that really interesting.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear us?
Hey, I can't hear you.
No. Why?
Have you been hardware muted?
No, I'm not hardware muted. I don't know.
No technical difficulties. I can no longer hear Kate. Hold on. Actually, I know why.
Why?
My headphones weren't plugged in.
Well, I guess everyone's looking
Awesome.
at me like super weird right now and like saying, Kate, you're not functioning right.
There we go. Okay, I'm back. I can hear you.
Okay, so wait. Before people think I'm going crazy, I was trying to keep them company, and I don't think they realized that like you were out of Baltimore and I was out of Northern Virginia. So I mean, that's an awesome relationship. So if anyone's out there that's in a completely different state, like please join us on this hangout. So I mean, I always told Mac the more the merrier. So, but I
agree. The more people we have, share your questions, ask while we're doing all of this live, and try to get to as many of them as we can.
Or even just be a part of the panel if you have any expertise on this. But with that open offer, let's continue on with this, because I actually that's an awesome idea in terms of actually putting your introduction line or getting straight to the point to the degree that you have like a full sentence as your subject line. But do you have proof that you actually have success in this, since you're saying that you're going to boost up my response up to from 20 to 80? That's really significant,
So apparently Kate wants proof on whether or not this is real, what I'm talking about actually works. So
I'm not the only one. It's
okay, Kate and everybody else out there.
There you go. Thank you.
Everybody wants to know, am I just blowing smoke up your butt? So there's this great tool that for anybody who's in business development, who does any kind of cold emailing or email marketing, you should definitely look into. It's called Yesware. It's a Gmail plugin, it allows you, it tracks your emails and lets you know when somebody's opened them, where they were in the world when they opened them, if they forwarded to other people, and it gives you a percentage of how many of your messages were opened and how many of them were replied to. So I'm going to share with you right now the statistics from my most recent email campaign on Yesware. And as we can see, in the last 30 days, I've sent 184 tracked emails with 148 of them open and 61 of them replied to. That's an 80% open rate and a 33% reply rate. My reply rate by itself is higher than most open.
And your multiple opens, actually.
And my multiple opens. And that's because a lot of times I'm sending emails to decision makers or to other people within the company, and they want to send the email out to the right person. So they'll get my email and they'll resend it out to somebody else who's supposed to, who should be seeing it. So that's interesting. Like when you send an email to a company, and then all of a sudden you see a little while later that your email's been opened up 8 different times at like 4 different locations. You know, there's a bunch of people within the company who are now looking at your email, trying to decide if this is something that they want to pursue or if there's anything they want to respond back with. So yes, this is my proof. I can prove that you can get an open rate of cold emails up to 80%.
Okay, so I don't know if this question gets a bit too specific. Well, no, and it is going to be a bit specific, but this tactic or this cold emailing tactic that you do, would you say that it's universally effective? Universally meaning that any industry can utilize this tactic and be as successful as you are.
I would. So I've used this tactic for a B2C company, you know, a business to consumer company. I've used it for a B2B, business to business company, and I'm now using it for a company that's dual market. So I have businesses that I deal with and consumers I deal with. And at every stage, at every industry I've reached out to, I've gotten replies. I've even gotten replies back from like CEOs of top marketing firms. I'm talking about like some of the top marketing firms in the world. You know, I've gotten replies back from people at Coke, at Under Armour, at Zynga, and right now I'm dealing a lot with boutiques. So, you know, a lot of boutique owners, and I'm getting interest from boutique owners around the world. You know, from small boutiques to high-end boutiques to high-end fashion designers to just fashion design. This has worked across the board and across industries because at the end of the day, people are people. They want you to be. They want you to interest them. Like if you're going to send me an email and I don't know you, at least provide me with something that's of interest. You know, at least let the content be relevant to me. Don't just send me anything. Send me something that's going to be relevant. And that's the key to that. That's the key to the cold emailing. You know, your subject line or what you're writing to should be relevant to who you're reaching out to. It should be something that they understand, something that's core to them, and makes them want to open the email. So that's always key.
So when it comes to emails, it's the longer the subject line with majority of your message is going to be a lot more effective than something that's short, sweet, and to the point. It doesn't rarely get open. So you also said your Twitter, you can cold tweet. So how do you go from that long subject line to like only 140 characters and get a response?
So that's different. So let's take a step back and talk about how I find people who I want to message in email. So what I like to do is I'll go on LinkedIn and I'll know already a company I want to reach out to. So let's say I want to find a buyer at Sephora. So I'll go to LinkedIn and I'll look for Sephora. And I'll look for people with titles like buyer or president of marketing or I don't know, brand manager. And I'll just try to find the people who fit that description or somebody who's a director. You know, somebody who's a decision maker who might deal with what I'm trying to implement with them. And once I find that person, I then want to send them an email. So I probably don't know their email address. But a lot of times you can find a lot of companies, you can guess somebody's email address if you have their first and last name. Because typically if you have a company email address, it's your first initial last name at, you know, whatever the website is .com, or it's your first name dot last name first initial dot last name, something along those lines. And you can guess what the email address is. But conversely, sometimes when you're on LinkedIn, you'll find people, and then you'll see if you can find them on Twitter, because Twitter is a little more personal.
Yeah.
And so if you can find them on Twitter and see if they're fairly active, do they use Twitter, a few times a week, you can kind of scroll through their timeline, and a lot of people a lot of business people will put some personal information in there. You can see what kind of music they like. You can see like what concerts they go to, what venues, the place they like to eat. If they have a certain type of food they like, and so then you can see a little bit about them, and now you can tell yourself a personal message to them. So let's say in the case of the person at Sephora, if I find somebody who works there and I find their Twitter, and I might see that they love Asian food, I might write a message like, how's it going at so and so? I'm a huge fan of Thai food myself. Just had curry for lunch. By the way, I'm an aspiring designer of a new product line and would love to talk to you if you had 10 to 15 minutes. And then tweet that and just see if they respond. You'd be surprised how many people respond, because at the end of the day, most people just want to be helpful. Most people are comfortable with sharing knowledge, being helpful, talking to you, and they'll take a 10 or 15 minute phone call or email. The first time I did that, who really worked for me, was a guy who was, what was his title? He was the senior manager of digital partnerships and development at American Express. Very smart guy, and his background and everything that he does was about how startups could work with big businesses. And I sent him a tweet similar to that. He responded to me and sent me his email address. I sent him an email and we scheduled a phone call. And since then, and that was almost 2 years ago, and over those last 2 years, me and him have developed a rapport and a relationship where he's an advisor of mine. He's somebody that as my company grows, I'll reach out to and I'll ask for advice. And who knows, one day that might parlay into him introducing me to somebody at American Express. But he's already introduced me to other people in like larger companies. He introduced me to the company that actually does the marketing for American Express. He's like, here's somebody above us, who might be more into your business strategy, and set up a meeting for me in New York. So, it's amazing what can happen out of those small, simple, cold emails and cold tweets.
That's some crazy stuff.
And the key is not to be scared, Just because somebody's a CEO or a director or a president of a big company doesn't change the fact that they're human beings, they're people. They don't want you to be a weirdo about it. They don't want you crowding their space. But they're always open to talk and share knowledge, right? And not everyone's going to be that way, but you'll find some. You'll find those people who are just happy and excited to share knowledge, especially with startups, because the startup world is so exciting. It's so new. Everybody's always excited. So these people like to get excited too.
So I guess with the basic tweet, so there's not no hashtag or anything. You're just what about direct messaging on Twitter since it's there, or do you just broadcast? Do you just simply tweet it to broadcast it, or do you actually just utilize a direct message function on Twitter?
I just tweet it because I don't know if other people had this experience, but for me, a lot of times, a lot of direct tweets a lot of direct messages I get are just spam. Or if you follow somebody, that automatically sends you a direct message back. And so I personally don't open a lot of my direct messages, just because a lot of times it's not really relevant, or it's just somebody's introducing themselves to me. It's like, okay, I follow you, we'll talk later. But when you broadcast it that way directly on their Twitter feed, it tends to have a different impact. I find that you get a better response that way.
So how long does it usually take for your conversation on Twitter to transition to a different mode of transportation conversation? Do you go to phone calls or emails, or do you actually, does it just kind of depend on the individual?
It kind of depends on the individual, but typically it goes from a short Twitter conversation to exchanging email addresses, so you can schedule a time to talk or to meet. If there's somebody in your area, in your local area, you might schedule something and meet them for coffee. If it's somebody who's, in another state, like, yeah, I was talking about who lives in New York, well, we scheduled a phone conversation. Most of these people are going to be really busy, so working around their schedule always works out.
So at the end of the day, if it's a long subject line via email or is short 140 characters on Twitter, is that it could be completely out of like risk or like that fear that we all have, but just doing that could and more than likely will convert to an actual phone call, which is what you want, right? Or a meeting. So like make it actually in person.
Right, and that's the key. These cold messages and cold tweeting. The goal is you want to get that meeting with that person. You want to get to talk to them. You want to see them. You want to get their time so you can really explain what you have to offer or what you want to learn from them. Because sometimes it's not even that you want to get the product of somebody. You want somebody to buy your product. Sometimes you just genuinely want somebody's mentorship. You want to get advice. You want to learn from somebody who's in the industry who you don't know how to quite reach out to. These are great ways to get past a lot of those barriers you don't have. A lot of the barriers that are in front of you. Because having a network is the most powerful thing you can have. But when you don't have that network yet, when you don't have those people that can get you those warm intros, it can be tough. But this is a way for you to kind of work through that.
Through the email and the Twitter, I just recalled, like, you utilize LinkedIn as your primary contact source, kind of like your address book.
Yeah, so LinkedIn is where I go to find people. If I can find your first and last name, I can probably find your Twitter and your email. And from there, kind of work through, because most of the people you want to reach out to in these businesses, they're on LinkedIn. You don't know who they are, but you have an idea of what they do and who their company is. So if I know what company I want to reach out to, and I know what the vision in that company I want to reach out to, well, now I just got to find the people there. And once I find them, well, now I just need to figure out a way to reach out to
them. I like that. Honestly, I'm on LinkedIn. I mean, I post here and there on status if people even do that. Well, the people that actually know how to do it. But yeah, I mean, I don't think I've actually utilized it so effectively as you. So I find that really interesting. But actually, the fun fact is that you didn't bring up Facebook, but I know that Facebook can differ for everyone else. Some personal usage, such as myself, is strictly for friends and family. And then sometimes you utilize it for your personal business. But, how did we meet? Just a caveat on this.
So how did me and Kate meet? It's funny. So I'm part of a group on Facebook, a Baltimore Tech group. It's a group where it's just all about technology going on in Baltimore. And there was a time when I was really active and posting a lot in the group and engaging in conversation. And Kate one day just kind of popped up, and I started noticing her in different conversations and mentioning my startup. And I was like, hey, who are you? Haven't met you. Really glad that you seem interested in our product. Would love to meet you and learn more about you. And that was a big thing for me. When I first got into the technology scene here in Baltimore, I just met with everybody. If I didn't know you and I knew you were somehow connected to the tech scene, I would invite you to coffee. I didn't know if there would be anything fruitful from it. I didn't know who the person was half the time or what they did. I would just meet them for coffee. And lo and behold, a lot of great things came out of that, including my current co-host, Kate.
Yeah, that's so crazy. Like, I don't care what people think in terms of like email or Twitter. You are like the cold messaging master. Because I mean, the way that we actually got introduced, we didn't even get introduced. You just freaking cold messaged me and be like, hey, you want to meet? And I was, like you said, the tech industry is completely open unless you have like a stick up your rear. But, I mean, everyone wants to talk, and everyone wants to just exchange information. And actually, at the same time, I was actually just getting into the tech scene in Baltimore. So that was so cool. So you're just, like, actually the cold messaging master. I'm just going to call you that.
Well, you can't be scared to reach out to people. You can't be scared to ask for things. So sometimes people think it's pompous. Sometimes it gets on people's nerves. But, if you don't ask, you'll never know. And you'll be surprised sometimes when you ask what the people's response are. You never know until you ask. It's just how it goes.
I like it. So now I'm going to start cold emailing people just because I need friends. Don't tell anyone. Don't tell anyone that.
Funny. Well, I hope this edition of the Mac Starter blog was helpful for people. This question, as I said, actually came in from a viewer of ours, Jonathan Moore, CEO of Rowdy Orbit. Check it out. For anybody out there who has any other questions, ideas, or things that they would like for us to talk about on this vlog, or if they would like to join in, please let us know. Our information will be in the description below, and hope everybody has a good week. Bye, everybody.
Yes. Cold message, either Mac or me. So we'll see you next time.
See you next week. Bye, everybody.
Okay. Bye.